Dead Elephants podcast, dating,
Number 2.
episode 2.
We got a second date.
Oh,
That's cute.
stop.
But we learn it doesn't mean anything until you've had 3. So we're still
That's
able
right.
to interview other people on this podcast.
Just in
and still
case
be
you
okay
didn't,
with it.
Ben introduced us to a new idea that probably don't go above 3 dates without leading a person on.
That's
No?
sure.
He's already uncomfortable with the notion. I like
That's
hard and fast rules.
That's Ben's choice of wisdom for himself. He did not prescribe it for other people, to be fair.
Thanks, Chris.
That's
It's
right.
okay.
And it sounded to like Ben, there was some flexibility, right? Like there was a potential second kayak adventure if the first one didn't pan out, but obviously single kayaks,
Single kayaks only.
not a double kayak.
No.
Not until you're in a serious relationship, and then it's double kayaks only.
You didn't actually share am I right? 2 single kayaks less intense than sharing a double kayak?
Oh no, I'm on board with a double kayak. I think team building exercises
Really?
bring out different
Right.
attributes of the person.
Ah, so you're actually sussing out the person from their ability to
Of course.
get on board.
Yeah, that's what dating's about.
Wow,
Sussing
there
out
it
the
is.
I
person.
love it.
You know what? I think you might have converted me.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is great. Double bicycles?
I've never tried one, but
I've heard they're really difficult,
Okay,
actually.
okay, all right.
Yes.
All right, so episode 2, the way we're going to work through this is episode 2 is kind of men's dating experience, and then episode 3 is going to be women's dating experience. But obviously, there'll be a bit of cross pollination here as we
Yes.
share insights on this. Where do we want to go with it, Chris?
So let's delve a little bit deeper. And Ben, you shared us a little bit to start episode 1, your dating history in a little bit more depth, as much as you can share with us.
awesome. Let's go chronologically.
Thank you.
I've always been friends with women and girls throughout my teen years and my 20s. And in school, I had a couple of just short, silly flings, I think. I don't want to call them relationships, but year 10 Ben would have.
Year 10 Ben, that's got a
yes.
ring to it.
Yeah.
Mate, I
And
think
then-
they're all flings. We
Yeah.
can call them
Okay.
flings. You're okay.
Sounds
Yeah.
good. And then coming out of school, I had a couple of relationships in my early 20s, which were just short 1 or 2 month relationships. In hindsight, both of them, I jumped into the relationship, or we jumped into the relationship a little too prematurely, and we could have dated for a bit longer, worked out that we weren't that compatible, and avoided a breakup. But that's okay. I learned from that. So neither particularly positive relationships. And then I started using dating apps about 2.5 years ago. And actually pre-dating apps, I've never been proactive or bold at making the first move. Never. Those 2 relationships in my early 20s were both initiated by the other person, and I just went along with it. And so, I think that's why I was single for the best part of my 20s, just because I wasn't taking any initiative, which is okay. And then,
Can I ask? I get a sense you're a bit more of an introverted guy.
well, apparently I'm 63% introverted according to 16 personalities,
Okay.
but I'm on a journey to being more introverted, I think.
And
Oh.
Laura, you're Colombian, so you're 163% extroverted.
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And the only reason I bring that up is because I do actually think it affects dating, right?
Sure.
Is that I think that from a dating perspective, when we were growing up, guys would initiate this whole conversation that we're talking about right now. And so
It was almost expected that they would.
yeah, and so if you're an extroverted guy, that plays into your sweet spot. If you're an introverted, more a more introverted human, it took a huge amount of relational capital to get to a place where you'd be like, "Hey, when did you go on a date with me, please?" Like that was a real challenge, and that's where I'm trying to get my head around this kind of online dating stuff. Does that play out for you, being in the realm of online dating? Is it like, do you feel you're like sitting down with a phone like, here I freaking am again, swiping right or whichever direction you swipe
Yeah.
to figure it out?
I'd say it wasn't my introverted energy that meant I wasn't proactive through my 20s. It was just bravery, I think.
Yeah, okay.
I wasn't that confident in myself to get to know someone else. So I'd say I'd put it down to bravery. But then your question around, I guess, the guy taking the lead and that being the norm historically, I think it still is. Guys still tend to take the lead more, and that's somewhat of an expectation
You're talking generally or in Christian subculture or both?
generally, and probably more so Christian subculture.
Okay.
I've never been asked out on a date on dating apps. I've always been that one to take the step. Yeah, so there's still that expectation. Or
Okay.
the norm, I guess.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And so then it was mid lockdown, and I've always wanted to find someone to fall in love with and find a life partner. And then I just thought, okay, let's put ourselves out there and try dating apps. And it was actually a couple of non-Christian friends of mine who encouraged me to try it. They knew that I really wanted to find someone, and they said, Benny, what's your hesitation with dating apps? What are your barriers? And we worked through them. I was worried about there not being people that I'd be interested in, namely, I guess, devout Christians. That was the first hesitation. The second one, I was concerned about my perception and what people would think about me using dating apps, which came from a bit of a prehistoric stigma around dating apps.
Oh yeah, nerds use dating apps.
Yeah.
Is that what
Yeah.
you're talking about?
No.
Is that the perception?
Not nerds,
Okay.
but
Who uses dating apps in
who
inverted
uses
commas?
dating apps.
No,
Exactly.
but what was your specific concern as to what people would think?
My
of
friend, people around me would think that I was using dating apps to sleep around.
You? Right.
Oh,
Because
okay.
that's I guess,
You're a floozy.
the
The old Christian booty call. Do we get to that? Is that episode 4? That's episode 4.
No.
Okay.
That's the director's cut.
well, no, I think a lot of people used to have that perception towards dating apps. That that's
Right.
what they're used for. And so my first barrier of people that I'm interested won't be using dating apps.
Because they're also players. Like only players are using dating apps, so I'm not going to find someone
Yeah, exactly.
of overly high repute
Yeah.
on one of these platforms.
That's right. So we changed my friend's filters from atheist to Christian, and then looked at some of the profiles, and I saw a friend who's a minister and some other great-looking, wonderful people who looked like they were wonderful, and so that tore down that barrier. And then I think I just did some reflection and realised that the stigma I had was probably inaccurate. People are really using dating apps for many purposes, and many people use them with great intention to find someone to settle down with.
And it sounds like they give you a filter to be able to find those people.
Exactly, yeah, you can find those people. So got rid of my barriers, tried Hinge 2.5 years ago, and I've used it on and off since then. I've had 2 relationships since then. One was someone that I met in person. Actually, Laura and I were invited. It was a setup. We were invited to a murder mystery night by a friend to set me up with this person. And I was the murderer, turns out, and I'm a terrible liar, so everyone guessed that I was the murderer. But yeah, a first date came out of that, and then a 3-month relationship, and that was a really positive relationship. And then I had a 9-month relationship last year, or 8 months, which was also really positive, and I met her through Hinge.
It sounds like the dating app, by your own confession, you had a struggle with bravery in
Yep.
person. Sounds like the app gave you that bravery that you were looking for.
Oh, it's straight in the deep end. I think the bravery came from me, but the dating app was a forcing mechanism to put
Okay.
yourself out there. And it really is putting yourself out there in quite a vulnerable way.
Yes,
Opening yourself up to rejection and a lot of it.
I've got a couple of questions.
please.
So first one is, how big's the fish you're holding in your dating app photo?
Oh, that's
'Cause
a
that's-
big no-go, Duncan.
No fish at all.
No fish in your dating profile.
I thought that was an essential quality for a good dating profile photo.
What do you reckon, Laura?
I think there is this kind of stigma of like, if he's holding a fish, he's a douchebag.
I'm
and
really
I think
lost. I don't
Sweet
understand
mercy.
this reference. I'm
the
sorry.
classic fishing picture holding a big fish.
It means
That's
they're
like,
adventurous. It means that you're out on the
Yeah.
ocean.
that's like the stereotypical.
Well, then it just, I don't know where, just kind of said that so many guys had it, and probably most of those guys, there was this tendency that they ended up not being very nice guys.
Right.
So I think that's why that idea came. I don't, yeah.
See, that's something I'm completely ignorant to this one.
Okay, so I mean, but you
No, I
guys-
understand it now.
Yeah, no. So you've got to sculpt this, right? And
Yeah.
the goal is that you're trying to put your A game out there. So for me, just taking you back 20 years, okay? A game time is that the CK1 went on.
Oh my
You know?
gosh.
The what?
Yes, exactly.
The Axe body spray Africa, if I couldn't find
The
link.
terrible cologne.
Do you know, like,
I see.
and then
So wasn't CK1 the one that guys and girls could both wear?
that's right. It was a
Yeah, there
unisex
you go.
fragrance, smelled good. It showed some air of sophistication.
Calvin Klein.
Okay.
Sweet mercy, how out of touch am I? And then you go pick up the person. You would, you know, for a couple of days beforehand, have some kind of deodorizer in your car to make sure it smelt nice. You pick them up. You go on a first date. That first date can't be too expensive. It can't be too cheap. But that's the like we've got to see if it's going to work.
You're putting on a show at that point.
But what I'm getting from a sense from this is all of that is kind of playing out digitally on a Hinge app, right? Like, is that you're trying to sculpt the best version of you to get that first date, right? Like,
Yeah, I think so.
So what does that look like?
Well, it should depend. I think it should bring out a realistic version of what you're like, and it should focus on your interests, what's important to you, some of your better qualities. But it should be a realistic picture of what you are. So for me, I try to be funny. I think I'm funny.
Yeah,
You
great.
are.
I like it. You make me chuckle on it.
Good, good. I like to get into nature and appreciate it. So there's quite a few nature pics. There are
Not with fish.
no fish.
Zero
You
fish.
need to have caught a fish to be able to get a photo. So I'm not.
You could AI a fish into your
Yeah,
photo.
Of
if
course you
want
can.
to.
These days you can.
Yeah, and then it's evident that I'm a Christian. So I have there's one question.
Like monastic robes. You in a monastery. You hanging out with a nun.
You could definitely do that.
Okay.
Well, Christian is visible on my profile, and then I have there's a question where it says you choose our first date. So the person that's seeing my profile can choose our first date. It's a bit of a joke and something easy to engage with. And my three options, I can't remember. It's drinks at a jazz bar, picnic from a lookout, and thirdly, you rock up to my church and we pretend we're meeting there for the first time.
Oh,
And so that brings out the funny side,
I
as
see
well
it.
as that I go to church,
Okay.
as well as
I
that I
love
like, have romantic.
I think I'm picking the
That's
jazz bar, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't been to the basement in the city for a number of years. So.
My church is also great, so
Okay, all right,
feel free to come.
Okay, so you craft a biopic,
Yep.
and then you've got your bio, and then when you're reading, you know, because obviously there's some degree of swiping involved, profile comes up, you're reading that profile, what are you looking for in a profile response, right? Because now you can see this other person who is also, I'm guessing it's got to be a mutual swipe
It,
in the correct direction.
No, so
No? Okay.
yeah, so what happens is I think that I might be wrong on how the logistics of it go, but my understanding is I can swipe right on someone, and I can pop up in their like in their swipe kind of routine. But if they say no, I just never get it was a match. But if they happen to have swiped right, I get a notification saying, oh, good, you both
You've got a
liked each
match.
other. Yes. But it doesn't mean like someone could have swiped no on me, but this app will still show him up.
But
for
when
me.
you get that match right, now I can see
No
more
one can
about you?
message. No, it doesn't amplify what you see.
when am I sliding into a DM?
No, that's a way to match. So
Oh,
for
okay.
example, you can swipe or you can respond. So there's different ways. Like I can like one particular picture from your profile. I can respond to one of the prompts if it is like a question, like the 3 questions, what would you choose? Or something else. So they have multiple questions and they can respond to that. For example, my now boyfriend, I posted a picture.
We had to do all of this in person, Chris.
My overwhelming sense is, man, you guys have got it good.
yeah, really.
Really, like
This is
do
all
you
the
know-
stuff you're talking about. We do in person to your face.
I'll tell you what the difference is. This process for us back in the day was potentially risking years of relational equity to determine, like we are physically.
in a group setting.
We are interpersonally, metaphorically swiping right or left on people.
There's a
And
high
each one
risk.
of those decisions has relational consequences for your friendship circles, for your relationship with that person. It just, I said it last episode, everything was more amplified and the the stakes were so much higher.
Swipe left was them getting up and walking away mid-conversation. Like, you get ghosted, we got
Yes.
abruptly rejected in front of our friends.
Yes.
I'm just...
So I'll tell you for real, Lara and I went on a date when we were 19. Lara had, she was going to kill me for telling the story, but here we go.
You've been married long enough.
She had a
It'll be
couple
fine.
of other young gents who were pursuing her at the same time. I knew of one of them. I didn't know of the other two. She dated one of the other guys instead of me after we had our first date. She dated him for 2 years. And for that 2 years, well, actually, and the year following, 3 years, we were at uni together. Now, this says a lot about me, to be honest with you. This wasn't everyone. But because we'd been on the date and she'd chosen someone else, for 3 years of uni, we barely looked at each other in the eye in tutorials. That was the risk I took to put myself out there and go on those noodles and gelato date at DY Beach that day. You mentioned the car. In my grandfather's 1988 Toyota Cressida. Can you believe she said no to that? With sheepskin seat covers too.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, that's...
I put the sheepskin seat covers
Mate,
on.
what else could you have done?
What could I have done?
Well, Lara had some growing up to do.
It's true.
Yeah.
So the reason I say that is that's why I am legitimately envious of the opportunities that lay before you. Was it was just high stakes.
It sounds hard. But there are definitely downsides and challenges to the context that we're dating in as well. Shall we talk to some of them?
Sure.
I'd
please.
love that. Yeah, sorry. Keep on going.
Great.
Downsides. Let's run through them.
Downsides. So we spoke about the consumeristic, infinite choice side of things
Yeah.
before, and I think that we spoke about that in the last episode. That leads to a less willingness to commit, and kind of the grass is always greener perception. So I think that's important to try and deconstruct in your own mind if you can. I think another one is, Laura, do you have any wisdom on?
So when you're talking about consumeristic stuff, can I push in on that?
Yeah.
It's kind of like Netflix. Like when I get Netflix and it says it's a 96% match to what I'd like, I'm swiping left.
Yeah.
Like if it's not 99, I'm not interested in watching whatever this garbage water show is. But in our dating pool, like you would totally swipe right at 63%. Do you know, like what I'm saying is that because
Sorry,
there's
Carly.
so many
doesn't mean it.
choices, you feel like, mate, there might be a 99% match out there. Is that kind of what you're driving at?
Yeah.
No?
It could be. I mean, it depends what idea of the one. Like, is that an idea that you have? There's only one person for me, and until like 100% like match for it. I come from the idea you can put me in a room with 100 people that they are believers in Christ, and we have somewhat like similar values and ethics. I could probably have a very happy marriage with like 30, 40 of them. I don't think that there's a concept of a one. So then when there is this kind of pool of dating, I think I came into, yes, possibly there's someone else that I'm going to click to it earlier, but at the end of the day, it's the work you put into it. Like no one is going to be 100%, it's the work of it. Maybe someone might start at a 60% and someone would start at an 80%. But at the end, how much work I put into it is what's going to get me to that 100% long-lasting relationship.
That is super helpful because I think if we bring theology into this conversation, the marriage concept that we're talking about is a covenant. And the point of a covenant is you've made the promise, and the promise is to work out how to be compatible going forward. Tim Keller talks about this in Meaning of Marriage. Kathy Keller writes a chapter that says we all want to find Michelangelo's David, or in this terms, the 99%. Instead, what we should be looking for is a block of granite with potential. And yet, what I'm hearing is these apps are setting up, the currency here is compatibility, and yet the Christian theology says compatibility is important to a degree.
It's humility and like...
Commitment is the thing that drives
yeah.
that compatibility. Or again, to put it in Keller's words, you've got to find out a way to fall in love again 5 or 6 times over the course of your lifetime. So is it theology of covenant? Like what comes in for you guys consciously in terms of your faith, in the spirit, in your mind, when you're going through this process? What are the theological paradigms that you're thinking through as you go through this?
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, that finding someone's about compatibility and commitment. And I totally agree, Laura. You can work with all kinds of different people, and dating apps are trying to force you to find that 99%, the sculpture of David. But you need to work against that and find someone that, because you can work with many people, many wonderful people. And so just committing to someone. Obviously, you need some level of compatibility, and then making it work and choosing to love them through a relationship. I'm excited for that when it comes. Christian paradigms for dating. Good question. I think that Christians should have the end goal of marriage, that you should date with the intent to last. I think you should definitely not try and get clarity on that too early on, but you should be working towards the end goal of finding someone that you're going to commit to.
If you know that you can't marry that person, it's probably time to call it off. Is that what you're saying?
I'd agree, yeah. So
you don't have to know that you'll marry them, but you have to know that you can't know that you won't marry them at the same time.
Exactly. You need that intentionality, but also keeping it lighthearted to giving it time to get clarity on that.
I'm an old dog. But I feel like even when I was dating, the lens was kind of, do I have a good laugh with this person? Do we have shared interests and affinities? So this is coming after a faith conversation, by the way. Is her mum skinny? Because that's really important.
Gosh. Sorry.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Not sure.
Just stick it at interesting, Ben. Don't incriminate yourself on that. Do you know what I've learned in this podcast? Because Duncan cancels himself doesn't mean I'm automatically cancelled by osmosis.
Yeah, that's good.
That's just something I've tried to preach to myself.
Okay. Well, I think your
first two are good.
Your first two definitely remain.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
A connection and a spark is important, and I think looking for that is a good thing to prioritize.
Yeah,
and someone with attributes that you find important, like empathy, caring, adventurous, whatever kind of attributes you're looking for, fruits of the spirit. And I think you should, definitely be having that faith conversation and understanding where they're at. Someone that loves Jesus and is going to point you towards him.
I just want to touch something, maybe edit it out if you're not happy saying this. I remember when Ben and we just started being friends, he had a criteria for the girl he wanted. It was a basic girl.
Yeah, basic.
Ben's just rubbed his
What
face
did that
with,
stand for?
with pain. Oh, basic stands for something.
Yeah.
It does, yeah.
Oh, I'm going to see if I can... No, I can't.
Believer.
No, it's...
I'm sorry, I feel like...
No, you've thrown me under the bus, but it's good conversation. So I used to have an acronym which were the general qualities that I look for in a woman. This was many years ago. When did we meet? Like 7 years ago?
Yeah, roughly.
Okay.
I love this kind of stuff, though.
B was beautiful.
Yeah.
A was... so beautiful, I want to be attracted to them. I think that's
good.
important, some level of attraction.
By the way, did you invent this?
Yes.
Okay, just checking.
It was workshopped with some friends.
Okay,
Trademark.
sure. All right.
This is the best idea. I love it.
A was adventurous. That is, they don't have to come canyoning with me, but willingness to try something new and push themselves. S was, now this was not a great one. S was spiritual, because I couldn't, C needed to be caring and it couldn't be Christian, and I couldn't find another way to fit Jesus loving, devout in there. So
Sure.
S was spiritual, in bold brackets Christian,
Sure.
or a lover of Jesus. I is intelligent, and C was caring. That was my acronym, and those attributes are still...
I was going to say, I don't know.
Important to
What's
me.
That
wrong
is
with
not bad.
But,
I'm very happy with
I'm
that.
not hard and fast.
Okay.
Like, I think I used to be looking for like the boxes to be ticked, but now I still value those attributes just as much. But I think I understand that someone might be a wonderful person and not just a bit more worried to take risks and not adventurous, and that's okay. Like, if we have a great connection and I love them, then awesome. So I just don't stick by
You're more willing to embrace the block of granite than perhaps you were 7 years ago.
Exactly, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well done for throwing him under the bus.
Thanks,
Yeah, that's a
Laura.
good one.
Yeah, not that I did not agree with him. It just, I remember we had a bit of a laugh when you
Yes.
first started telling him, but I was like, okay.
We don't have to edit that out.
Okay.
Do you have an acronym for your man?
Tom.
Tom.
Oh, no pressure, Tom.
That's fantastic.
She's just said it online. Hey, one of the other theological concepts I want to ask you about is sovereignty. Now, this might not come into it for you, but sovereignty is a bit of a...
Are you doing a 6-part discipleship series before you start dating?
Yeah.
Man.
I have a theory that in our more reformed or conservative or evangelical churches, we mistake sovereignty sometimes for inactivity. So God is sovereign, therefore I don't really need to take a lot of initiative in my life because let go and let God, I suppose, is another way of saying it. But what I'm hearing you guys talk in all of this is there's a very active process to this. So how do you reconcile like you needing to create the profile pic, the 3 points that are carefully curated versus God will bring the right person into my life at the right time? Is that a tension or you sit with them both together fine?
Good question. Well, I think God works through action and decision and through people. And as long as you're praying to God and asking Him for what, for what is His will, then and as long as you're, I guess, you're willing to go with His direction if He gives you that, then I think it's okay to be taking action, like setting up a profile and being quite proactive, as Laura and I are, in trying to find the right person.
Yeah,
And it's a bit of a broader question of sovereignty and free will and action.
Yeah. Actually, I heard Kat Harris. She had, well, I think she's not doing it anymore, but she used to have a podcast and she talked a lot about dating. And actually, something that she said is like, and she had someone in her podcast as a guest, and both of them kind of were saying that we put so much work into our careers. You know, we do the courses, we update our CVs, we are constantly updating our LinkedIn. Like, what if we put that same effort into dating? We will probably like see a big kind of decrease in singleness in church, but because we're too focused on like it was just going to show up, and like in a way we're just so used to that I click my Uber Eats and my food shows up, we think that's also how it's going to be with our spouse. And it's like, and that's when I was like, oh, that encouraged me to actually go and try dating apps and put myself out there. And also, you know, after doing the work is not only putting yourself out there, it's actually sitting down like, what are something that I need to be working on myself, and being also conscious I'm never going to be perfect until like I'm, you know, wholly to actually start dating. But I've dealt with enough stuff in my past that are going to allow me to love someone in the way they should be loved, and not kind of had that trauma maybe still affecting the relationships or relationships that I want to have.
I love that. I love that idea of investing in your dating life in the same ways you might. It's not that it guarantees, just like if I invest in my career, it doesn't mean I'm going to end up CEO, but it's certainly not going to hurt the cause, that's for sure.
But I think we should start investing in like photography packages for dating apps. Sorry, I'm just making a note for my wife while I'm on this podcast. So I think there's a real market with this.
I've actually been thinking how much AI does actually complicate this, like the whole realistic profile pic. There's a whole new range of ethics here in how you demonstrate yourself on these apps now with photography doctoring through artificial intelligence.
Do you have like a maximum amount of retouching that you're allowed to...
Princess Kate.
Yeah, like is there an appropriate
where's
level?
the
Like if I'm just removing a couple of blemishes, is that okay as opposed to all of them?
I would say I wouldn't judge anyone doing it because you're bringing up your first game. Like if I'm wearing makeup to my first date, why would someone be like frowned upon me editing something versus me wearing makeup to a date or whatever? Yeah. But I didn't do it personally. Just I feel like girls, we have a bit of a plus. We know our angles. I feel like guys are not very cautious. Like Tom's profile, when I met him, he looked so much better in person. I was like, my love. Like now I tell him like your profile was not the most like, oh my gosh, look at him. But when I saw him, I was like, was that the guy? He looks so much better in person. So I feel like, you know, angles and stuff. Where do you
You're
go?
like already going out with him. He doesn't need all these compliments.
I've learned about the selfie from above. I've learned the non-double chin angle.
You get the angles, but then on top of that, I remember when I was setting up my profile, one of my friends, I was showing it to him as being like, you need to put something that it's like, excuse me, that you don't think you're too pretty. Put something semi-funny, something realistic. It just kind of brings you a bit down. Don't like, and I guess that's kind of funny when it puts into like showing that you're also like easygoing, like you put your nice pictures, but you don't have to put all of them the row of your best, because in a way, like I will be super intimidated if the guy that I'm swiping on, it's like, he looks like perfect model. You feel like all these amazing girls will be like flocking over him. Right. He's not going to look back at me. So keeping it realistic, but not just, you know, super overwhelmingly, these are all my perfect shots.
I think you touched on a good point there, that you owe it to yourself to be your full self in not just your profile, but in those initial dates as well. Don't try to flex up sides of yourself that isn't the real you or an uncomfortable side of you. I think as someone who can be a bit of a people pleaser, I think I caught myself out trying to flex sides of myself according to who the person was that I was getting to know. But I think you do owe it to yourself to just be your full self. And if that's not the person that they're looking for, then that's okay.
I would just totally second that and say, yeah, operating from a position of transparency and security, because it's going to bite you in the butt later if you sell a lie. That's going to come out eventually.
Yeah, and I think also showing up sometimes to a date with a bit of an attitude, like, oh, I hope they like me. Of course, you don't want to be the worst version of yourself when you go on a date, but it's also going to, I wish I liked them. So don't try to mold yourself to whatever they say. Be like, oh my gosh, I really do that. I'm also into that as being, you're also showing up as like, I wish I also liked them. So
and I feel like that taps into that sovereignty piece a little bit as well. And there's another paradigm there about human identity. Like, can you do this process with a non-anxious presence, trusting that sometimes we often pray for open doors. How willing are we to pray for closed doors as well? That's the other theological side of this, is to say, I'm just going to be myself and God will make it clear whether that's the right person for that relationship.
I think that's a good closure to your sovereign question.
Can you pray for the closed door? Perhaps there's a diagnostic question there.
I think as a guy does a bunch of pre-marriage counselling, I'm always assessing, have you married yourself? And part of that, have you married yourself, is like an egotist question. Like, you've just basically picked another version of you to get together with, versus what usually the ones that are more successful are very opposite type personalities that fill in a lot of your weaknesses. And then the second part of the thing I'm looking for is your assumption that this person solves my problems?
Yes.
Or are you of the awareness that no, they just bring in a whole lot of extra new junk to the relationship that you need to have the humility and compassion to sort out together? But that's a marriage conversation, but I feel like it's also applicable here, because whatever the lens is that you both of you seem to be walking through, is we're looking at this for a long game. Is this working towards a serious relationship and then eventually marriage? Do you run any of that kind of diagnostic through your head as you're doing it?
I guess, yes, in a way. You're trying to have meaningful conversations, asking some questions a bit more deep to know how they're gonna, what you can look forward if you do decide to go on and marry them later on. I think, having those kind of questions will be very important, deep questions about, what does your childhood look like? How do you see yourself as a parent? Is it what did you learn from your past relationship? What is something that you may be scared of bringing into this new relationship as time proceeds? They're conversations that are important to have. And, it's a kind of, you want to know who you're marrying. We're doing at the moment 101 questions to ask before you get engaged. And they're just deep questions. We're not.
Is that a book?
It's a book. There's no ring on. There's a ring on my finger, but not on there. I'm not engaged.
Tom,
Tom,
you're
but
Tom. Tom's on the clock.
No, but we're talking
96.
through.
We might need to go ring shopping.
He knows. I talk enough about that. He gets enough Instagram reels of ring.
Sweet mercy.
But no, it's actually, I find it so interesting to just go through the book, and even if you're a bit scared of very full on going and be let's do this book together. Find those kind of questions, go through it, read it yourself.
Can you give us some questions?
Well,
off the top of your head?
I've kind of just said them. What is something that you're more looking forward to towards marriage? What's the kind of idea that you see towards marriage? Another one that we saw was what's something that you're worried about in marriage, and how are you dealing with it now? Or childhood stuff, how do you see, what sort of raising pattern you want to bring to your children?
And can I again second that? You mentioned marriage prep, Duncan. So I've done similar with a lot of couples, and the family of origin stuff, I guess this is an older man speaking to younger brother and sister here. The family of origin stuff is always more powerful than what I think people generally think of it as being.
My headspace was, Tom, what's your daddy wound that keeps you awake at night? Like, it was like, but that's a significant one, right? Like
family, in all seriousness, family of origin plays a much bigger part in our relationships than I think often what we think it does. Because when we want to go into marriage, and rightly so, we're writing a new story, we're leaving and cleaving, this is a new covenant. We think about the new story we want to write together, which is right. But that story never starts in a vacuum.
No.
And often those vacuums are actually different for each of the people. And you come together and you go, hang on a sec, I thought there was only one way of doing this and you're telling me there's two?
Yep.
It's hard. So to anyone who's listening who's dating, I would just say lean into the family of origin stuff more than you might think and don't see it as irrelevant to your new story. Yes, on the one hand, you're writing a new story, but no, it's never happening without a backstory.
Yeah.
All right. Next week, girls' perspective on all of this dating, yeah? We're going to talk about sovereignty again?
No, I've got other
Okay.
questions for Laura. I do want to give Ben one more chance, though. Is there anything else from a guy's perspective you want to touch on before we delve into Laura's story?
Not particularly a guy's perspective, but I think agnostic of gender. It's important to go easy on yourself in dating because there's, especially if you're using dating apps, there's a lot of rejection that happens, and that rejection can be from the very initial phase of liking different profiles and people not getting back to you, to people not being interested, to go on a first date, and then all the way through to a relationship ending. There's a lot of rejection that happens, and you can be quite hard on yourself and question whether it's you. But it's, I think, important to just go easy and practice a bit of self-love.
It's like 80% of internal monologue is all negative, so don't pay attention to it.
No, I think let's call it a day and hear Laura's perspective next week.
Thank you.
Are you the host?
I was going to say, I think I just found a new co-host.
Yeah, Ben, tag us out, Dead Elephants. You do it, mate.
Well, Chris, let's go.
I'll see you next week, Ben, as we host Duncan and Laura, our two guests, for episode 3 of Christian Dating in 2024.
Have a good night.
Love it.
Nice.
I love that Grizz started to snore in the background as well.
Yeah.